PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome, Vegas Golden Knights fans and everyone watching all around the world to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli, and welcome to PRConnectionsRadio.com. We have about a dozen shows on the network, amazing content on here. So I highly recommend to everyone watching all around the world, if you're on PR Connections Radio, check out all the shows on the network, not just Vegas Hockey Hub. If you're on the YouTube channel for PR Connections Radio, welcome in. If you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, it would help us out plenty, as we have a dozen shows on the network. We upload every show to the PR Connections YouTube channel. And we have so much content being put on the network, and we have Vegas Hockey Hub here as well. So go to the YouTube channel, PR Connections Radio, and subscribe. If you are on the Vegas Hockey Hub YouTube channel, I say welcome to everyone watching here. If you want to like this video and share to all your friends all around the world, I would much appreciate it. And if you want to follow Vegas Hockey Hub, we are on all major platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere at Vegas Hockey Hub. And then lastly, if you want to follow your host at Ian Rickelli18, we are on social media. I live tweet during the Vegas Golden Knights games. So if you want to follow me on social media, at Ian Rickelli18. And a player profile for you on Vegas Hockey Hub. And we are going to be discussing Michael Amadio. You know, it's a me, Mario. And Michael Amadio, really good player, someone we definitely need to talk about here on Vegas Hockey Hub. So we are going to get into it because we have to start from the very beginning. Michael Amadio, he was drafted 90th overall in the 2014 NHL entry draft. And of course, he came from the North Bay Battalion in the Ontario Hockey League. And with Michael Amadio, there's a lot of positives we can talk about with him. Because Michael Amadio came from Ste. Marie in Montreal. And this came from Ontario. My apologies, everybody out there. Ste. Marie in Ontario. Yeah, I know. Montreal, Toronto, stuff like that. So he came from Ontario, Canada, Michael Amadio. And this guy being selected in the Ontario Hockey League priority selection was taken 36th overall. Now, when it came to Michael Amadio in the Ontario Hockey League, this was a guy who played on a good team. And just to really point out how good of a team Michael Amadio actually was on, he ended up having a very good teammates in Barclay Goodrow and Nick Paul, two guys who eventually would play in Tampa Bay. Barclay Goodrow now out there in New York. And you have Nick Paul, who's currently a Tampa Bay Lightning. So for Michael Amadio, the first 2 years that he was playing in North Bay for the Battalion, they were called Brampton Battalion before they renamed to North Bay. So in 2012, 2013, Michael Amadio, 6 goals, 19 points in 63 games. Later that season in the playoffs, they'd be eliminated in the first round by Sudbury. So I will say for Michael Amadio, he registered 0 points in the playoffs that year as they got eliminated. Now, fast forward to the next season for Michael Amadio in the Ontario Hockey League. He would have 12 goals, 38 points in 64 games for North Bay Battalion. And then fast forward to 2014 OHL playoffs, and what a good time it was to be a OHL fan. As they would get past Niagara in the first round, move on to Barrie in the second round, and then they would beat Oshawa in the conference finals. So in the finals of the Ontario Hockey League, it would be North Bay, and they would lose in the OHL finals that year in 2014. Michael Amadio would have a part in that. In their run to the OHL finals that year, Michael Amadio would have 4 goals and 9 points in 22 playoff games. Not bad for somebody in year 2 of playing in the Ontario Hockey League. The next year, Michael Amadio would break out. Michael Amadio would have a fantastic season in the Ontario Hockey League, as the next year, 2014, 2015, in 68 games, Michael Amadio would have 24 goals, 71 points that season. And I will say for Michael Amadio, the fact that he went from 26 assists the year before to 24 goals is exceptional. And Michael Amadio would continue to display a good performance in the Ontario Hockey League, as in the 2015 OHL playoffs, North Bay would get to the conference finals of the Ontario Hockey League. After beating Kingston and beating Barrie, they would lose to Oshawa in the conference finals. But in those 15 games for Michael Amadio, he would have 6 goals and 15 points in 15 playoff games. So Michael Amadio, in his 3rd season playing for the North Bay Battalion, would average a point per game in the playoffs. He would average over a point per game in the regular season. Not bad for a guy like Michael Amadio. And his final season playing in the Ontario Hockey League, 2015, 2016, he would actually do something exceptional. Michael Amadio would have his career performance. He would have his best performance in his last season playing in the Ontario Hockey League. He would have 50 goals, 48 assists, a whopping 98 points in 68 games. Not only did he eclipse a point per game, but he set a franchise record for 50 goals in a season. And for the North Bay Battalion, the funny part about this is that they did make the playoffs that year. And in the playoffs that year, they get past Peterborough in the first round, but they lose to Barrie in the second round. And when it comes to Michael Amadio that year, you can't put any blame on him, because Michael Amadio, check this out, in his last season playing in the OHL, his last playoff run in the OHL, he would have 12 goals, 18 points in 11 games. That's right. Michael Amadio would average more than a goal per game in the OHL playoffs. If that doesn't tell you how good Michael Amadio was in the OHL, he had 12 goals in 11 playoff games. Just incredible. And for the North Bay Battalion, it's actually something I want to point out because I actually find this incredible. So you see here that he had 50 goals in the 2015-2016 season. Well, if you actually go to the all-time records of the North Bay Battalion, if you actually look at what has happened with the North Bay Battalion, it's actually quite incredible, because a few years later, some guy would break it in 2018, 2019. So at the time, he would set a franchise record. In fact, Michael Amadio would play with this guy. It was Justin Brezout. So the fact that this guy had 61 goals and surpassed Michael Amadio is incredible. By the way, for anybody who's wondering what's up to that guy now who broke the record that Michael Amadio set, he's playing in the AHL right now for the Providence Bruins. So Michael Amadio did a lot of good. And actually, the fact that he broke the record set by Nick Paul, who was his teammate earlier in Brampton, is actually quite incredible. So Michael Amadio definitely did some good in the OHL. And just to point this out, really just to break it down, Michael Amadio in North Bay / Brampton had 92 goals, 228 assists. Let's rewind that back. 92 goals, 226 points, and 80 penalty minutes with a plus 72 in 263 games played. So for Michael Amadio, he was incredible in the OHL. And after his tenure in North Bay, Michael Amadio, he would be in the NHL. He would declare for the draft. And what Michael Amadio would be doing is getting selected in the NHL draft. In fact, Michael Amadio was the last pick in the NHL draft. And he was taken by the Stanley Cup champion, LA Kings. The LA Kings took Michael Amadio in the third round. They would take him with the last pick in the first round. Fun fact, by the way, the player who was taken in the first round by the LA Kings is current LA King Adrian Kempe. So I will say for the LA Kings, that was pretty good for them. The fact that they got him in the first round, and they took Michael Amadio in round 2. Now, notable NHLers who are playing now, who were drafted in the same round as Michael Amadio, would end up being guys like Jonas Johansson, who's a backup goalie in Tampa Bay. Braden Point, who's an all-star now in Tampa Bay. He was taken in the same round as Michael Amadio. Ilya Sorokin, who has become a face of the franchise in with the New York Islanders. One of the best goalies in all of hockey. And you also had Nathan Walker. And Nathan Walker was part of the 2018 Stanley Cup run with the Washington Capitals. So a lot of good talent was taken in the 2014 NHL draft. Sorokin and Point, the two notable guys. So continuing with Michael Amadio. Michael Amadio continuing with his career. Michael Amadio would play in the AHL. And not only would he play in the AHL, he would spend parts of 5 seasons for the Ontario Reign. In 2015-2016, after leaving the OHL, he would play 11 games for the Ontario Reign. In those 11 games in 2015-2016, he would have only 1 goal and 5 points for Ontario. Now, when Ontario got to the playoffs in 2015-2016, unfortunately, they would get bounced in the conference finals by the Lake Erie Monsters, a.k.a. the Cleveland Monsters now. But yeah, the Ontario Reign got to the conference finals in the 2016 playoffs. Michael Amadio was part of that roster that season. 2016-2017, he would play 68 games in the AHL, have 16 goals, 41 points. Not bad for being in Ontario. And then in the playoffs that year, in 2017, for the Ontario Reign, they unfortunately would lose to San Diego in the first round, and Michael Amadio would have 2 goals in 5 games in the 2017 OHL playoffs. Now, he actually would go back to the Ontario Reign after skipping 2017-2018. We'll talk about that in a second. But in 2018-2019, he would split between the NHL and the AHL, as in 2018-2019, he would play only 28 games in the AHL, 8 goals and 26 points in Ontario. So Michael Amadio kind of splitting as a two-way guy between the NHL and the AHL. Like, he was good enough to be almost a point-per-game player in the AHL. We'll talk about what he did in the NHL a little bit later. And then finally, in 2020, 2021, he would have just a 2-game stint in Ontario, and he would have 2 points in 2 games for Ontario. So for Michael Amadio, he did pretty well. And the fact that he had 35 goals, 104 points in 130 games in Ontario, I look at that as somebody who was excellent in the AHL. As well, you know, if you needed somebody that could put up points in almost every other game in the AHL, Michael Amadio was your guy. So Michael Amadio would eventually graduate to the NHL, and he would make his NHL debut on October 26, 2017 against the Montreal Canadiens. And he actually would play 37 games that year for the LA Kings. And for Michael Amadio, I actually find it really interesting that when it came to Michael Amadio, he had 4 goals, 8 points in 37 games that year. But in the 2018 playoffs, he would actually play his first ever game in the NHL playoffs for the LA Kings. Who would Michael Amadio play up against in the 2018 playoffs? Well, the LA Kings would be swept by the Vegas Golden Knights. So Michael Amadio's first ever playoff game would be against the Vegas Golden Knights. Talk about an ironic twist. And I want to give a little fun fact to you. Well, Michael Amadio would score his first ever goal against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But what I find fascinating about it, what I find incredible, is that Michael Amadio, his first ever goal against Toronto, the goalie in net that night was Curtis McElhinney. I find it interesting because Curtis McElhinney he had a long career in the NHL. But what I find fascinating about it is that with Curtis McElhinney, he eventually won with Tampa Bay. Like Tampa Bay Lightning, who I mentioned earlier in the show, they had Nick Paul, Barclay Goodrow, his former teammates with the North Bay Battalion. He actually would beat a goalie for his first ever goal that played for the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. Anyway, getting sidetracked, let's get back to what we're talking about. Now, Michael Amadio, after having his 2017-2018 season, he would be promoted to a full-time member of the LA Kings. So in 2018-2019, he would have 6 goals and 13 points while having his first season playing only in the NHL. So Michael Amadio at this point is getting better. He's gradually getting better. I mean, this is a guy that had 8 points in his rookie season. Then he had 13 points in his second season. So how would he do in year 3? Well, the LA Kings wanted to know that. Because the LA Kings would give Michael Amadio a 2-year deal to stay in LA. And Michael Amadio would reward the LA Kings as in 2019-2020, he would have 6 goals and 16 points in 68 games. You know what? Not terrible. Not terrible. It actually would be a career high for him in 16 points. Still have the same amount of goals. It was 2020-2021 where he unfortunately would start to decline. Michael Amadio would only play 20 games in the shortened 2020-2021 season. And Michael Amadio would only register 2 points in 20 games. So because Michael Amadio would only register 2 points in 20 games, they would send him down to Ontario where he would have a 2-game stint. And in the meantime, for Michael Amadio, he was being put on the trade block. And as he was put on the trade block, he would be dealt to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Christian Wolanin. And I'll say for Michael Amadio, him going to Ottawa in 2021, essentially at the trade deadline for the shortened 2021 season. And Michael Amadio, before we get back to the whole Ottawa situation, here was his final stats as an LA King. In 4 seasons, he would have 16 goals, 39 points in 168 games played. Now, Michael Amadio, for the most part, was a bottom 6 forward in LA. This was a guy who the LA Kings put as a 4th-line center, as a 4th-line winger in LA. Now, how would he do in Ottawa, you might ask? How would he do playing for the Ottawa Senators? Well, unfortunately for Michael Amadio, he would only play 5 games in Ottawa. And in those 5 games, he would only register 1 point in 5 games. So for Michael Amadio, he was in an unfortunate situation where, all right, you leave LA after a 4-year stint. You're no longer on the Kings. You get traded to Ottawa. and he only played 5 games for them. So where are you going to go next? If you're Michael Amadio, where are you going to go next? Well, in the 2021 NHL offseason, he would sign in Toronto. And after playing in the preseason, after playing in the first 3 games of the season, the Toronto Maple Leafs would decide to waive Michael Amadio. Now, in those 3 games, he registered 0 points for Toronto. He never registered a point in the Toronto Maple Leafs. In fact, this picture right here was hard to find because he played so few games in Toronto. I guarantee this is a preseason photo. Now, getting back to the conversation at hand. After being waived, Michael Amadio would get claimed by your Vegas Golden Knights. Michael Amadio would become a Vegas Golden Knight on October 30th, 2021. And that season, Michael Amadio would have a career high. He would have a fantastic year as a Vegas Golden Knight. As in 2021, 2022, he would play in 56 games that year, and he would have 11 goals, which is a career high, 18 points, another career high for the Vegas Golden Knights. And what I appreciated about Michael Amadio was the fact that while being on the bottom 6, he gelled well with Matthias Janmark. While being on the bottom 6, he gelled with people who were on his line. Regardless of who it was, he did well with certain teams. In fact, it didn't matter what line mate it was, what combination it was. It just seemed like Michael Amadio gelled well with the players that he was teamed up with. Regardless if it was Evgeny Dadonov, regardless if it was somebody like, for example, if he was put on the 4th line with Kolazar and Carrier or Waugh, if Brett Howden was on the same line as him, regardless of who it was, Michael Amadio fit in well with the Vegas Golden Knights system. And Michael Amadio would actually stand out for Vegas. As a matter of fact, Michael Amadio would stand out so well that Kelly McCrimmon would give Michael Amadio a 2-year extension with the Vegas Golden Knights. Hence, why Michael Amadio is on the final year of his deal this season. Because Michael Amadio signed a 2-year deal which covered 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024. So, for Michael Amadio to get a contract extension by Vegas was a big deal. Because you got to remember where Michael Amadio was just a year prior. Michael Amadio was on his way out of the LA Kings. He only had a 5-game cup of coffee in Ottawa. He only had a 3-game, bite of a donut in Toronto. But now he is being trusted by Vegas. Vegas giving him a contract extension meant that the Vegas Golden Knights trusted Michael Amadio to be a bottom 6 guy. And indeed, Michael Amadio would become a solid bottom 6 forward. As Michael Amadio would play 67 out of 82 games in 2022, 2023. And not only that, Michael Amadio would shatter his career highs. Michael Amadio would score 16 goals on the bottom 6 for the Vegas Golden Knights. He would have 27 points while on the bottom 6. It's also the same bottom 6 that had like Brett Howden. And also it had Phil Kessel. You had some really good players on the bottom 6 that played with Michael Amadio. There was even a time where Michael Amadio would be put on the same line as Chandler Stevenson and Mark Stone. There was even a time period where Michael Amadio even played a little bit of time with Riley Smith and William Karlsson on the same line. So Michael Amadio was being trusted as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, and he rewarded them with a career-high 16 goals in 67 games. Now, what did Michael Amadio do in the playoffs, you might ask? Well, in 16 games for the Vegas Golden Knights, he would have 5 goals, 10 points and would help the Vegas Golden Knights win a Stanley Cup. Michael Amadio would end up winning a Stanley Cup in Vegas. You see a photo right here of a fan celebration. He brought the Stanley Cup back to his hometown, Sault Ste. Marie, out there in Ontario. And I will say for Michael Amadio, it's definitely a good story, and what he has done in Vegas is a good situation. Now, Michael Amadio's stats as a Vegas Golden Knight: 27 goals, 45 points, and 120 games. Now, for a bottom six forward to have 45 points and 120 games, that is a good thing. It is a good situation when you are a bottom six forward and you are scoring a point in a little under about 40% of the time. Okay? 45 points and 120 games, that is a little under 40% of the time you are getting a goal or an assist as a Vegas Golden Knight. And for Michael Amadio, I'll say this on record: I will not be surprised if he breaks another career high this upcoming year, because Michael Amadio has blended well in Vegas. Michael Amadio has done a fantastic job as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. And right now, he is on the same line as Paul Cotter and William Karlsson. Right now, it is Paul Cotter, William Karlsson, and Michael Amadio. Now, I get it. Paul Cotter, Pavel Dorofeev, there are some young guys who are probably going to share time with Michael Amadio. There's no doubt in my mind that with some young guys eventually get called up, maybe Jonas Raumbier, he'll get called up. Brendan Brisson at the end of the year, maybe he'll get called up and be a winger instead of a center. Regardless of what the situation is, I will not be shocked if Michael Amadio is a very big deal for the upcoming future. And like I said before, in 2022, he signed a 2-year deal with Vegas. And with him only making $762,000 for the Vegas Golden Knights, and considering the fact that he had 16 goals last year, we don't know how many goals he's going to have this year. The question I'm going to leave you with, the question I want to leave with everyone watching all around the world, is if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, Michael Amadio is a free agent. Is he someone who is a priority to bring back? Considering that you have watched this video and you've gotten to this point, is Michael Amadio, and the fact that he has had 27 goals and 45 points as a Vegas Golden Knight, would you bring him back on a multi-year deal? Because his contract is up after the year 7. After the 2023-2024 season, Michael Amadio is one of the handful players that's going to be a free agent next year. You have Marchessault, you have Stevenson, you have Carrier, and you have Amadio. So if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, and I'm asking the fans here, would you bring him back after this year, considering what he has done in Vegas? That's going to be my question I want to leave everybody. So, great edition of Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. We're doing a player profile on Michael Amadio here on this episode. And I want to let everyone know that we have all of our episodes on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. And we have a YouTube channel as well. So go to PR Connections Radio or Vegas Hockey Hub and check out all of the content we put out there. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. This is Vegas Hockey Hub. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections